In this video, we're going to run through setting up Cerbos using Okta for authentication in an Express application. This demo is available on GitHub in the Cerbos Express Okta Cerbos repo, and we're going to run through creating an application inside of your Okta account. So you're going to need an Okta account to test with, and you're going to need Node on your machine. So to begin with, we're going to go and clone the repo down to our local machine. So the usual get the repo and then git clone, and that will go and pull it down. So this project has already been set up to make use of Okta's provided Express OpenID Connect package, and everything is going to be configured through that, and there's some environment variables we need to configure based on our Okta account. So we quickly look at the code here. Our application is pretty simple. We have an Express server. We're using the Express OpenID Connect service. We are connecting to a Cerbos instance, and in this case, we're using a Cerbos Playground Demo PDP instance. So this is an instance of Cerbos that we're running for you up in our own cloud. We do not recommend this for production, just for latency reasons, but it's a good way to get going without having to spin up a Cerbos on your machine. So as you can see here, we configured the Express OpenID Connect package using the information provided from Okta, and we'll run through that in a minute. But what this essentially means is it creates some logins and logouts and the OAuth redirect routes inside of our Express application without us having to do any extra work, which is great. And it stores the user profile inside of the request object for us to use later on. So let's go and npm install all our dependencies, and whilst that's running, let's go and jump into Okta. So in our Okta account, there's a couple of things we need to do. First off is we need to go and create our application. So this is going to be a custom OpenID Connect. So under Applications on the left-hand side, we're going to go and create an app integration, and we're going to select that OpenID Connect OAuth 2 application. And for this case, in this demo application, it is a web app. So now we give this a name, so we'll call this Cerbos example. If I can type. And we're going to leave kind of everything by the default. Now, the default application that you've cloned from the repo is going to, by default, run on port 8080, and there's these paths that are created by the Express OIDC package. If, for whatever reason, you change the port that the Express app is running on, you'll need to update the URL here and also below. But everything else, we're good. We're just going to, for simplicity, allow everyone in your organization to access this and save it. So once that's done, there's two bits of information we need to grab, which is the client ID and the client secret. So if we jump back into our code and look at our .env sample file, duplicate that and just call it .env. This is where the app is going to grab the data from. You can see here we need to provide the Okta domain, the client ID, and the client secret. So Okta domain is available here, and you just copy it to your clipboard. So for our example app, it's that. And then the client ID, copy it from the app here, paste, and then the client secret. Now you'll likely want to provide these via whatever secret management you use for your deployments, but for this example app, we're just using a environment file. So that's done, but by default, this won't work just yet. So the way we've demonstrated using Okta and Cerbos together is we want to take the groups that are provided by Okta, pass them via the token into the application, and then those groups are then passed on to Cerbos in the call-off to go and get the access permissions based on the Cerbos policies. So what we need to do is enable the groups to be passed in through the token. And to do this, you need to go into security, then API, go into the default authentication server, unless you have another one, go then into claims, and we need to add a claim. So we're going to call this groups, and we're going to add it to the ID token, and we want to say pass in the group values. And for this example, we're just going to pass it match regex.star for any scope. And what this means is for every ID token request, it will go and add in a field called groups, which will be the groups from the Okta directory. Now, for your real application, you'll probably want to limit this down and use different claims. But for this example, this kind of demonstrates how the flow works. And we save that. And just to show you the groups we have set up, so we have 3 users in this Okta account. We have Emre, Alex, and John Smith. And then we have 2 groups beyond the users one. So we have an admin group and a user group. And the user group has all 3 users, and the admin has just 2. So with all that done in Okta, we can now actually run our application. So we're on npm run start. And that's going to say it's running on localhost 8080. If we open that up, we'll get the landing page. So this is now configured using those environment variables to connect to your Okta instance. And so we're going to go through the login flow here. Go log in. And now we want to log in with our Okta account. So this is using the application that's created in your Okta instance. And now the token exchange is happening. And that token is being returned back to our application in the redirect. So this is showing the information that comes from Okta profile on the left, and then the request and response to Cerbos on the right. So this is a dummy application that's like a contact CRM resource, and access to this and the roles in this will vary depending on what roles, or in this case, what groups come from your Okta profile. So on the left, we can see here the Okta profile information. So this is the token that's come back from Okta, your name, username, email address, etc. And the important thing here is we've added this groups claim through that extra step we did inside of Okta. So these are all the groups inside of the directory that myself, Alex, Cerbos.dev, is belonging to, and this would vary based on the user. That information is then used to construct the resource, the request to Cerbos on the right. So the request to Cerbos requires 3 bits of information: the principal, so the user, and in this case, we're passing in the user ID from the token. And the list of roles is the groups that come from the Cerbos profile. The next thing to provide is the resource, or in this case, resources that I'm trying to take actions upon. So I'm trying to access 2 contact resources, contact 1 and contact 2. They have some attributes such as an ID, a name, and email address, and the actions that I'm trying to perform upon these. So I'm trying to perform an update and a delete. And based on the policies that are defined for Cerbos, we get the response back from Cerbos. And we can see here for contact 1, for the action delete and update, I'm allowed, and I'm also allowed for update and delete on contact 2. And this is because my example policy here is allowing admins to do everything. Depending on who I was and what roles I had, the response here would be different. Just to show you what that looks like in code, we have an example, a get endpoint for a particular contact. So here we go and fetch the contact from the database. We're also using a helper method from the OpenID Connect Express middleware from Okta to ensure I'm authenticated. And then in my check call to Cerbos, using the Cerbos node package, we're passing the principal information, so that ID, the list of roles from the request.usercontext.userinfo.resource object. So this is populated by that Express middleware from Okta, and that's going to pass in the groups. And then the resource is that resource that I fetched from the database, just passing in those attributes, and I'm asking whether the user is allowed to read. That check then goes off to the Cerbos instance, and then you can check the next line whether the particular request is allowed. Am I allowed to read this particular contact ID? If so, I'm going to return the JSON. If not, I'm going to return a 403 and an error message. So that's a quick run through of how you can use Okta with Cerbos. You can find out more on cerbos.dev, and please go and join our Slack community if you have any other questions or thoughts around how to use Cerbos along with Okta in whatever language you choose. Thanks.